千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. Chapter 59, as I mentioned previously, has a title in Chinese, 长生章. It's got two characters. The first one literally means long, and the second character, the character in the middle, means life. Long life is longevity. So this is the longevity chapter. Now, when we talk about longevity in the Tao Te Ching, it is not referring to physical longevity as a primary thing. It's a side effect. It's talking about the lasting power of spirituality. If you are lasting in terms of your spiritual refinement, it will affect every other aspect of your life, including the physical aspects, and it will naturally lead you to helpful practices, which will help you live to the full extent of the lifetime as you were meant to, which in many cases is going to be considered a long and productive and happy life. It used to be that when people are able to make it to the age of 80, they would consider themselves quite fortunate, and that would be long living. And prior to that, there was a time in the history of humanity when living to 50 was an accomplishment. Nowadays, with medical science, with our knowledge in the helpful practices of life, I think that if we cultivate the Tao, if we pay attention to what's going on, I think it's not going to be difficult at all for all of us to make it to 100 years or possibly even more. So spiritual longevity implies physical longevity. Now, the chapter is what we have started out discussing last time, and as usual, we began with an analysis of the sections. This particular chapter, and when we get to chapter 60, you're going to notice chapter 60 is the same way. The hidden structure of this chapter, it is unlike many of the other chapters that we have already seen, where it follows a pattern like 16 lines divided into two halves of 8 lines each. And each half is divided into a quarter of 4 lines each. So 4 times 4 is 16 lines. This has a different structure. It's got a structure where it has 3 sections. The section in the middle is the main body of the chapter. And then the first 2 lines are the introductory lines. And the last 2 lines, the concluding lines. So that is the hidden structure of this chapter that we uncovered last time when we looked at the repeating characters. The repeating characters are interesting in this chapter. It follows a pattern where the last 2 characters of a line are repeated as the first 2 characters of the following line. In some cases, the last 3 characters, like this line and this line, become the first 3 characters of the next line. Then we have the last 4 characters of one line becoming the first 4 characters of the next line. So that particular pattern we're going to see again in 60. For now though, let's focus on this. last time we got to the halfway point. The halfway point, line 6, is about half of the main body of 59. So this is one of those chapters that I feel is particularly of interest because it's the kind of thing where, as a Western reader, when you try to decipher the lines, without help, it will seem rather cryptic. The chapter will seem cryptic. But when it's properly explained, I know from experience that you will feel that it makes all the sense in the world. And it is something that you can apply in your life. What the main body is actually describing is a progression to the Tao. From the beginning, when people are still relatively unfamiliar with the Tao, to getting into the Tao for the first time, to accumulating virtues, and then at the very end, attaining a lasting kind of Tao, the lasting spiritual power that I alluded to. So it goes through multiple stages, and all the repeating lines depict those stages. So just looking at this, there's actually quite a few that we can identify. From line 2 to line 3, from the intro to the first line of the main body, it identifies a repeating characteristic, which is the very first part. It's the Tao 101, so to speak, and that is conservation. So we'll talk about that in just a moment in our recap. And then following that, we've got this thing called submitting early. That's another stage. Then we have emphasis on accumulating virtues. That would be stage number 3. Stage number 4 that we touched on last time but did not explain completely was about getting to a point where there is nothing that you cannot overcome, meaning you can overcome anything. So that's already pretty good, but it's only halfway through the stages on your way to the Tao. This is going to point out the practical aspect, the practical benefits of your cultivation. So I'm going to do a recap of what we talked about last time. So I'll just reiterate the initial 3 stages, and then that'll lead us into our discussion of the 4th stage, and then carry into all the way to the end of this chapter. So as I mentioned, we start out previously with a concept called conservation. The character for conservation appears in line 2 and line 3. It is the beginning of the Tao practice. Conservation in this context is talking about conserving your resources. From the Tao perspective, your resources include your time, your energy, and your mental focus, your attention. So the metaphor that we used previously in talking about conserving your time, your energy, etc., was using a farmer whose work is to take care of his crops, and on a day-to-day basis, he's tending to the crops, seeing to their needs, removing weeds. So weeds, in this case, are defined as plants other than what the farmer is trying to cultivate. When you map that into the real world to you and me in spiritual cultivation, it means that we have particular goals. Those goals may be virtuous behavior, virtuous thoughts, good things, peace of mind. We want to cultivate those, and we want to remove the weeds, quote unquote, in our lives, meaning the plants other than what we're trying to cultivate, or in this case, the distractions in the material world that take us away from the goals that we have in mind. If we can do that, if we can take away the distractions, eliminate distractions, or ignore the distractions, then the resources that's been devoted to cultivation which symbolize in the farmer example as water and fertilizer, those will naturally allow the crops to grow and grow well so that there's a bountiful harvest. So bottom line, do not let yourself be distracted, particularly by all the temptations in the material world. Now, previously, I cited another example because this is actually a very old concept. It goes back nearly 5,000 years, and there's a story from one of my books, the Tao of Happiness, that talks about this concept of getting rid of distractions, allowing the natural growth, the natural vitality of something good, something positive to manifest. So this particular story was about the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, who went in search of a sage to advise him on how best to manage the empire. And he encountered this small boy who was looking after horses, and the boy advised him that, hey, look, listen, running the empire is no different from taking care of a bunch of horses. The best way to do it is to get rid of all the things that are harmful to the horses, and then just take a step back and allow the natural vitality of the horses to manifest. They become healthy and strong and happy. In the same way, the emperor could be focusing on all the things, the distractions, the harmful elements, the things that don't benefit the subjects of the empire. He could be working on removing those. Then he just has to step back and let the natural vitality of the empire, or the citizens of the empire, the subjects of the empire, to manifest naturally. Then the empire grows strong, just like the horses. So all of these go toward the example that from the beginning of this chapter is talking about how in governing people and serving heaven, there's nothing like conservation. There's nothing like conserving your resources, which are finite and limited. Use them to the best possible, in the best possible way, and you do that by removing all the things that counteract, that are limiting, that get in the way. Then we used a couple of practical examples from real life to try to illustrate exactly what Lao Tzu was trying to say. So one common example is when it comes to a project or task that we try to accomplish given a certain amount of time. So the duration that you have to work on the project is similar. Later on, we extend that to the lifetime of an individual. Now, think of it as a lifetime of the project, lifetime of the project implementation. If you allow yourself to be distracted, there's a lot of distractions. They require your time and attention. Some of them look very urgent. They take you away from project implementation. They help you procrastinate. So the unwise that fall into the trap of procrastination will often say, oh, I still have time. You know, I can be spending my time doing something else. And then next week or tomorrow, I will focus on the project exclusively. And then next week or tomorrow never actually comes. The wise, on the other hand, would not allow themselves to be distracted. They would get a clearer view on the amount of time they have versus the number of things they still have to do. So then the procrastinator is going to be wasting time. Well, the wise ones will be working a little bit at a time, one step at a time, baby steps, incrementally, gradually closing in on the milestone or the end goal. So usually the procrastinator, which by the way describes me when I was much younger and very unwise, the procrastinator, I can speak from personal experience, becomes desperate at the 11th hour, you know, when the deadline is looming, whereas the wise is still on track, relaxed. The milestone, the end goal, the finish line is no different from all of the other logical stopping points that's come and gone, and that each one was met because of the incremental progress. And then finally, time runs out for the unwise, and then the deadline arrives for the wise, but it is smoothly handled. It's no big deal. It's like any other day. So this is what it means to be conserving your resources, knowing that time is limited and the amount of energy that you have, the amount of effort you can expend, that's also finite. Then there's more. The concept of conserving your resources, it naturally leads to the concept of submitting early. So in the original lines written by Lao Tzu, you'll see it appear in lines 3 and 4. Only with conservation is it called submitting early. And then submitting early is called emphasis on accumulating virtues. So we'll talk about that next. For now, though, let's focus on this link between conservation and submitting early. Conservation, as you have seen, is to not allow yourself to be distracted, just ignore or remove the harmful elements. Now, that was in the context of a project that you work on. Now imagine that your entire life is a project. From birth to death, this is your project. The goal of the project is to end up better than when you started as a person. A lifelong commitment to improve yourself so you leave this world a better person than when you came in. That is the path of spiritual cultivation. If you expand from the task level to the lifetime level, then you see the connection between conserving and submitting early. So just like the procrastinator, the typical person is going to be trying one thing after another, and the Tao is perhaps going to be one of those things that is tried. And the unwise, just like in project execution, will say, oh, I still have plenty of time. In life, that same kind of mentality will say, oh, I'm still searching. I'm not done with my search yet. I'm still questing for answers. I don't know what it is, but I will know it when I see it. That's very common. So they try one thing after another, never quite devoting enough time to get a substantial result out of any one of the dilettante pursuits, basically, and end up feeling lost in terms of life direction. So what Lao Tzu says is that, well, listen, just like when you work on a project, you should be setting up a direction, you should be doing a little bit at a time, and that way you can be smooth and easy in project execution. In living your life, it should be the same way. You should figure out what it is that you want, get on the path as soon as possible so that you can be easy and smooth and graceful, never really be stressed out by anything, and then live a life with meaning. So in other words, what Lao Tzu says is that I know you want to try different things, but listen, it's in your best interest to submit early, give up on this fruitless search of looking everywhere, just to get on the path of the Tao as early as you possibly can and start making progress. This way, you can be moving with definite purpose, and the ancient sages will all say, believe me, you're going to be thanking yourself later. So this establishes that link from conservation to submitting early. Then once you submit early, meaning you get on the path of the Tao, you will be emphasizing accumulation of virtue in your life. So to walk on the path of the Tao is to take one step after another, living one day after another, and practicing one virtue after another consistently, and accumulating virtue gradually, a little bit at a time. Never too much at any one time, but your results overall, accumulated over a period of time, is going to be really powerful. So looking at this progression here, I think the graph does make it easy to follow, going from conservation to submitting early, and then from there to emphasis on accumulating virtues. The corresponding lines are to the right, and when you have it in lines of verse like this, it is not as easy to see that progression, but you can still pick it out. We go from conservation to submitting early to emphasis on accumulating virtues. Now, when it comes to virtues, it was important for me to introduce everybody to a couple of terms that are usually never talked about in the West. You won't find it in books. You won't find it in the many Tao Te Ching translations out there. They are really just skin deep. They don't delve into the depths of Eastern thought. So that's why I wanted to make it a point to highlight the difference between Fude and Gongde, where the first one is the virtue of prosperity, the second one is the virtue of merit. They're both important, but they're not the same thing. So as I talked about before, the virtue of prosperity, it's all externally driven. It's about the material world. It's about the things that you give, like charitable donations. As an example, giving people material assistance, more than just encouragement or, hey, attaboy, great job, keep doing what you're doing, thumbs up. Not just that. That's more intangible. The virtue of prosperity is the tangible things that you can help other people with. It may be to support a religious practice. It may be to help feed the hungry. All of those would be things that are done in the material world. Now, it's actually a very powerful practice because karmic laws apply. So your material assistance of others will be reflected back on you sooner or later as a karmic reward that also manifests in the material world. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. For now, let's also turn our attention to the virtue of merit. Unlike the virtue of prosperity, the virtue of merit, Gongde, is internally driven. It's all about the work that you do to yourself, for yourself, on yourself. So it's about the spiritual realm, the spirituality, the heart, the mental landscape. All of those things are internal to you, whereas the virtue of prosperity is your interaction with other people, your interaction with organizations. Maybe you provide donation to them as an assistance, that's external. But for you, reflecting, contemplating, learning, understanding, all of these things take place within your mind. Now, in Zen Buddhism, there is a long-standing tradition and understanding to point to the external world, the material world, and say that even though objects are in the material world, you can see them, you can touch them, you can hold some of these objects in your hands. They are ultimately illusory because they don't last. They come and go. They're transient. They're impermanent. But the lessons that you learn, the connections that you build, the karmic relationships that are forged, these are ultimately real, even though you can't touch them, even though there's no weight to them. There's no mass. They are intangible. They are the opposite of the material things, ultimately illusory, these things that are done in the spirit. in the spiritual aspects, these are ultimately real, ultimately lasting, and not transient. So whereas interacting with the world, you may see and feel compassion for the poor. That's material world driven. When you are focusing internally, it's talking about how you can see the truth of existence, your existence, the meaning, the purpose of your life. These are all self-nature driven. These are all internal by their very essence. So the compassion that you feel in the heart, that's internal, it can manifest in external giving to charity. So the two you can see are connected. So the self-cultivation can lead to external good deeds. There's no denying that what you do in society can be a valuable contribution, but what you do for yourself, that's the priceless Tao. One can lead to the other. Making a contribution to a worthwhile cause, to a good cause, can lead you to internal reflections on compassion, on giving, on how we are here to be of service to others. The whole idea of being the servant in leading changes, influencing changes, all of those are internal. So one can lead to the other, and your internal refinements in turn can lead to doing more work externally. That is the reason why I have the yin and yang symbol there. Now you can see, as we talk about this, that when you have internally driven virtue of merit, the rewards are the realization or the enlightenment pieces, nuggets of wisdom that you realize and then can incorporate into your own being. So the rewards of the work that you do in the virtue of merit is just as intangible as the work that you do. On the other hand, the rewards that you get in the material world from the good works that you have done are going to be of that nature as well, are going to be material. Now, in Christian traditions, some have said, and very accurately, that tithing can lead to personal prosperity. That's true. I have witnessed examples of that in my personal life. And even when you don't take religion into consideration, even when you just talk about charitable works, there are actually plenty of examples where giving leads to one being abundantly rewarded in a material sense. Let me just relate a story for everyone. It's a true story. Our main protagonist in the story, this is a lady by the name of Sue. She worked as a financial analyst for many years before she became famous as an author and also as a very popular speaker. As a financial analyst, Sue had access to all the records, all the financial records of her clients. She noticed one thing. Her clients who were doing the best of all, the most prosperous, the most successful, they, without exception, were all giving generously to charitable causes, their own favorite charitable causes. And that was the first thing she realized. And her first impression was, well, of course, they have more, so they give more. But then she noticed something that was odd. You see, Sue had access to records way before the current success of these clients. She knew what it was like for them before they became successful. She went back in time, she looked up these clients, and she found that before they were successful, they gave. They started giving proportionally, like, 10%, 5%, even before they became successful. Pretty soon, Sue came upon an important realization that when you give, when you work on the virtue of prosperity, it's actually very powerful. you get rewarded karmically in the material sense. And some of it can also feed into your internal work in terms of spirituality. To be able to give is a signal to yourself, to your higher self, and the universe. It's a signal of power. I have the ability to help other people. I express my ability to help others. The universe, existence itself, responds by giving you more so that you can give more. That's the way it always works. Later on, she became a published author. Her books became mega bestsellers. She spoke all around the world, and she related that story every now and then to talk about the importance of giving. True story. So let's continue on. This is pretty much the recap that we had. We were able to get to this point. Here in this slide, we talked about accumulating virtues means there's nothing one cannot overcome. So the image that I hoped to leave everybody with last time was the image of the plants that you see in the lower right-hand corner. What the plant has done is that it has cracked concrete. It burst to the surface. It went through something that seemed like an impassable obstacle, but it was so powerful that it was able to do this. I wanted to use that as a metaphor to talk about the power of gradual accumulation. When you accumulate something gradually, it's a process of the Tao that eventually allows you to overcome anything. Now, I want to talk about this in a couple of different ways. Number one, I want to talk about a concept called virtuous nature. You'll see virtuous nature at the bottom of the slide, 德性, and at the top of the slide, emphasis on accumulating virtues. There's a couple of ways that this can manifest, and let me explain. First, we begin with the individual level. What does it mean when you accumulate virtues gradually? Well, first of all, for you, for me, for the individual, it just means that you take small steps. It's a gradual progress in dedicated study of the Tao. You understand a little bit more every day, and it leads to possible enlightenment. It leads to insights. It leads to wisdom. And this happens over time. So initially, nobody will really notice what's going on because you are working on yourself internally. It is unseen, unnoticed by most. In the plant cracking concrete example, think of it as the growth of the plant, which initially is hidden from sight and not seen by anybody. And then one day it breaks through, right? So for the individual, it's similar. One day it happens. People take notice, like the cracks on the concrete drawing attention. Now I know everything that you see here on the left-hand side, I know this is true because I have witnessed it multiple times with my own eyes. Usually, it takes a year or two of dedicated work. But when someone is willing to put in that dedication, the small steps, the gradual progress, they will build up in time. So one particular individual, a very good friend that I know very well, it happened for him. He devoted himself to the study of the Tao, and after about a year or two, in a gathering, in a social gathering, people were discussing the Tao, and some of the people that knew him were surprised. It is not so much surprise about any kind of accomplishment in the material world, but it was just by the way that this particular person expressed his thoughts. They did a double take. What? Did he really say that? Was this the same person that I knew from a year ago? He seems so different. The insights he was expressing, he didn't say a whole lot, but just a few things that he talked about were totally different from the way that he was before. Everybody saw that. Everybody was surprised. Some were shocked. The same exact thing can happen to you if you dedicate yourself on the path. Initially, people won't know that there's any difference. After a while, though, they definitely start paying attention. They too will be looking at you with new eyes, a new appraisal. You know what? I had no idea that you had advanced to this particular stage. Or wow, that was wise. That seems so uncharacteristic of you. That can totally happen. This is what happens to the individual when you cultivate your own 德性, virtuous nature, little bit at a time. Never be in a rush. It'll happen. I also want to explain what happens in a group setting. This is what I have personally observed in the Tao community. So initially, the people in this group, in the Tao community, become aware of a particular Tao cultivator's spiritual attainment. They recognize 德性. They recognize the emerging virtuous nature that this person is perfecting. So they themselves want the same thing. They themselves are perplexed in life by the teachings. So they, over time, tend to go to this person with questions. So either him or her, that person who has accumulated virtuous nature, people tend to go to this person asking questions either about the Tao or personal matters. And the spiritual leadership role that this person plays can be very subtle, but basically the group begins to center around this particular cultivator who has become more refined. And with this kind of leadership, it unifies the entire group. It unifies the community so that everyone is working together, helping one another toward the same goal, whatever that goal may be. It's a goal that they define for themselves. What I have seen time and time again is that a group or community that can come together in this particular fashion around someone who has developed virtuous nature, that group is incredibly powerful. They can do a lot of things. They can do whatever they want to do. And this all goes toward the passage that we're studying now that says the emphasis on accumulating virtues leads you to a place where there is nothing you cannot overcome. You can overcome anything. And that's what this slide here is talking about. Now, let me come back to the personal perspective again, because there's something really special that goes on, which will be very practical and something that we can all use. First of all, let me just read out the translation. When there is nothing that one cannot overcome, one's limits are unknown. Okay, now, as I pointed out before, when there's nothing that one cannot overcome, that's a double negative. You can make it a little easier for yourself by thinking of it as saying, when one can overcome anything, when you can overcome anything, your limits are unknown. So that seems like a logical statement, but let me explain to you the deeper level of what it really means. There's a time that happens in every cultivator when they get to a point when they realize that the power of gradual accumulation really works. When you surprise people when something that you have been working on, and it may not be the Tao, it may be a skill that you've been practicing, when that pays off and you attain expertise in that particular skill, then you see the power of the gradual accumulation for yourself. That is a moment, that's a sort of a aha moment when you realize you can use the exact same approach for anything, that there are certain things you've been wanting to do, and perhaps a wish that you had as a child that you don't think you have the ability or the time or the talent to pursue at your age, whatever age that is. But then you suddenly realize that, no, wait a minute, that's a limit that doesn't really apply. I was able to do this one other thing with gradual accumulation. What else can I do the same way? So one particular method to understand what Lao Tzu is trying to say is by linking it to something that's quite modern, the 10,000 hour rule. What is that? The 10,000 hour rule was popularized by author Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Outliers. Now, the rule goes like this. It takes 10,000 hours of practice to achieve mastery of complex skills and materials, like playing a musical instrument, like maybe a technical skill, such as programming. People usually assume that others that have attained mastery have natural talent. Gladwell investigates and discovers, no, it's actually practice that is fueled by interest. So it takes interest rather than talent and the 10,000 hours to get really good, really world-class good at something. And this is one way to describe what Lao Tzu was trying to say. It's not so much inherent talent, but about gradual accumulation. One example that the author uses was Cirque du Soleil. Over the years, people around the world have seen the amazing acrobatic skills, the amazing athletic prowess of the performers in Cirque du Soleil. When the author looks deeper into it, he discovered that these people were not natural talents that had to be discovered. They, in fact, were regular, everyday people that just one day decides to pursue this. They walk into the Toronto office of Cirque du Soleil. They enlist in it. They undergo training. And then after years of intensive training, they get that good. They get good enough to perform day after day after day. So this was definitely a revelation for many people, myself included. I had always assumed that these people must be just naturally gifted. Now, with what Lao Tzu is saying, putting this together with a 10,000 hour rule, you then quickly realize that, whoa, wait a minute. Everybody has gifts that they are not using. I have gifts that I haven't tapped into yet. I used to think that I have limits. Well, many of those limits actually do not apply. It is the same for you. It's the same for me. It's the same for everybody. We all have so many incredible thoughts, ideas about what our limitations are that just aren't true. The Tao can help you uncover what those are, and by teaching you the gradual accumulation, you not only become great in your cultivation of virtues, but you also become virtuoso at a particular skill, such as a musical instrument, such as a foreign language. So the limitations that you thought you had before, well, they're meant for you to break through. So if you are listening to these words right now, I'm going to suggest to everyone that there are no real accidents, that this is indeed a message from the universe to you, that perhaps you previously had labored under the illusion of having certain limits that really don't exist. If so, then I'm going to suggest that you really want to delve into Tao cultivation seriously, to develop yourself as an individual, to better yourself to the utmost. Now let's take a look at the following lines. Line 8 says, the limitations being unknown, one can possess sovereignty. So let me explain. First of all, let me explain the first 4 characters. The first four characters of this line literally means know their limits. In other words, don't know their limits, or the limits are unknown. So when you talk about, this is exactly what we're saying when we talk about breaking through limited beliefs or self-imposed limitations. When you become an unlimited individual, it just means that you are seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, that what you thought were limitations upon yourself really aren't there. And what causes that realization? As I said, when you master the accumulation of virtue, you become unlimited. Just like the plants, use the plant to help you anchor this idea in your mind. Let this idea take deep roots in your mind. Just like the plants, you're growing, but that growth is not perceptible to other people. You know you're growing. Other people don't necessarily know that. You don't seem to be doing a whole lot. But then one day, people are surprised by what you have accomplished. So that is the day when you can further confirm to yourself that what Lao Tzu is talking about, it is true to life. It really works. It's extremely powerful. As I mentioned, it is something that I have witnessed myself multiple times, and I'm still seeing it almost on a daily basis. So I know that you can take advantage of this particular Tao teaching as well. So then let's tackle the second half of line 8. So first of all, we have 2 characters that just means can or able to, 可以. This is such a useful phrase that it has the same meaning in ancient times as well as modern times. So even in modern Mandarin, you're going to hear people say 可以 all the time. Then the last 2 characters there, 有国. The pinyin is a little bit misleading. It looks like you, but what's written as you is actually 有 in Mandarin. And then the character there, 国, that looks pretty much like the way it's spelled. So 有国. And what it means is the first character means to have something, to possess something. The second character there, 国, it means country, state, nation, empire, kingdom. It can be all of those. What all of those things have in common is sovereignty. Sovereignty is a nation's power to determine its own destiny. Sovereignty, when applied to the individual, when you quote unquote have country, have sovereignty, it means you have the power, the spiritual independence to decide, to make decisions about your own destiny. That's what it means. So in ancient times, for a king to possess sovereignty meant that it is a wise ruler who understood the importance of accumulating virtues. Such a ruler would certainly richly deserve to have a kingdom to rule. For the individual in modern times, for you and me, someone who accumulates virtues becoming unstoppable and unlimited, well, you will be in command of your life. This is what it means to have true spiritual sovereignty. You're in charge of your own destiny. You are independent spiritually in terms of spiritual matters, in terms of the direction of your life. You call the shots. You determine your own direction. You're the captain of your ship. Okay, so I think everybody understands what it means to possess sovereignty. Let's drive home the point. So as I mentioned, for the ruler, someone who understands the importance of accumulating virtues, yep, that's going to be a good king or good emperor. Someone who brings benefits to the people, power to the empire or the kingdom. For the Tao cultivator, spiritual sovereignty. It means understanding and owning your spiritual power, knowing how powerful you really are. The more you know about that, the more you understand that power, the more you can tap into it. Number two, being spiritually independent, not beholden to anyone. So here, let me be very blunt and say that, hey everybody, you can be your own master. You don't need to be dependent on an organization, on other people to tell you what to do. You know the truth deep within. It may take a little bit of work to unearth your inner master, your inner spiritual wisdom, but it is there. Number three, having the wisdom to determine your own direction. This means, and this particular line is left open-ended because what direction? Well, it means life direction, yes, but it also means the direction of your own spiritual cultivation, what to study, which virtues to accumulate, which direction spiritually should you be heading into. It's all of that. And at a certain point, you see the alignment taking place so that spiritual direction for you is one and the same as your life direction. Number four, taking charge of your life and destiny. So that is a major goal, is to take the reins of power that it was yours to begin with. It's your birthright. It is something that you had before that perhaps you have overlooked or forgot about. That's okay. This is a reminder that you can reclaim that power. It is your own. It belongs to no one else. So all of this leads us to the second set of three stages. So in our recap, we talked about conservation leading to summiting early. Remember, it just means, hey, don't be wasting any time. Conserve your resources. Your life is limited, so don't waste any of it. Get on the path of the Tao as early as you possibly can. That leads to accumulating virtues, what we were just talking about, extremely powerful, can do anything, overcome any limits. And that's the stage number 4 that you see there. And then the stage number 5. Stage number 4 is when you overcome whatever obstacles may be out there. And stage number 5 is when you suddenly realize that your previously held beliefs about limitations, they actually disappear. You actually realize that, well, wait a minute, there's nothing to stop me from accomplishing something that I've always wanted to do, something that I've been wanting to do ever since I was little. Then all of that means you possess spiritual sovereignty. You call the shots. You set your own direction. So this is what I mean, everybody, when I say that when you're just reading a translation of this chapter, it's gonna seem cryptic. But when it is explained properly, nothing else makes more sense. This makes all the sense in the world. It is so clear. It is so incredibly clear what Laozi is trying to communicate with us. And you can also see that he's doing his best to make it as easy as possible for everybody to figure out what he was trying to say. Let's continue. There's a little bit more. Line 9. With this mother principle of power, one can be everlasting. Let's talk about what that really means, starting with the first 4 characters. First 4 characters, 有国之母. It could easily be misinterpreted as saying that there's a mother of the country, because that's literally what it's trying to express if you look just to the characters. But if you look at the commentary throughout history, 国, nation, state, country, etc., that's sovereignty, individual spiritual sovereignty. Mother is not the literal mother of that, not the mother of the country, not the mother of sovereignty, whatever that may be, but the mother principle. And in the Tao, hopefully you've been following these talks for a while, so you know that it's customary in the Tao Te Ching for Laozi to refer to the Tao as the mother, the metaphorical mother, because the Tao is the source where everything comes from, just like the mother is the source of life for her children. And another chapter of the Tao Te Ching makes the connection explicitly clear by saying that if you know the mother, then you know the children. When you know the children, you know the mother. All of that is saying, when you understand the Tao, you understand the world. You understand everything, because everything comes from the mother, the Tao. And when you, conversely, when you understand the world, when you understand other people, how the world operates, you begin to have a glimpse of understanding about the Tao itself, because the Tao is the source, the mother. So this is the mother principle. Knowing the mother, knowing the children, the Tao principle of sovereign power. Then we need to spend a little bit of time on the last 2 characters, 长久. Literally, 长久means, we got 2 characters here, they both mean long, but they mean long in a different context. In English, we have long to mean something that is long in length, in physical length. A long stick, a long rope, etc. The second character there is also long, but there it is the same English word in a different context, meaning duration, long time. When you put the 2 together, you're talking about the meaning of something that is everlasting, durable, something that goes on and on and on, it's indefinite. So overall, line 9 is saying that when you grasp onto, when you have a understanding of the mother principle of power, you can be everlasting. You, your Tao, the Tao within you, can be durable, it's lasting. It goes on and on and on. It is indefinite. It is infinite. That's what it's trying to say. To be lasting is congruent with the Tao. This is another concept that's reiterated again and again in the Tao Te Ching, basically because the Tao is eternal. The Tao is constant. The Tao never changes. It's always there. It's always present. So whatever is transient or impermanent would not be congruent with the Tao. If you gain something that is a material benefit, but it's one of those situations where it is easy come, easy go, that's not the Tao. If you are able to let go of a particularly nasty habit, maybe an addiction, who knows, and you are able to stay off of it for good, that's the Tao, because it's durable, it's lasting. It doesn't come and go. So a yo-yo diet where your weight fluctuates, you lose weight, you're happy, you gain it back, you're unhappy, you lose it again, you're happy again, gain it back, etc. Yo-yo dieting, not congruent with the Tao. But to be healthy, to be fit, and therefore getting your weight under control permanently, so that this is the way you're going to be from here on, indefinitely into the future, that's congruent with the Tao. So 长久, to be long-lasting, everlasting, that's the Tao. So this is the slide that basically talks about all that. The authentic Tao is about real and permanent improvements. This is the reason why, I myself decided to not pursue the fads and trends in self-improvement books too much, because when I see that they don't create lasting change, I want something different. I want something that does. I want real change. I want permanent change. So what I really wanted when I was looking at the self-improvement stuff is that I really wanted the Tao. So think about this. When you have actually improved yourself, so you become a better person, you become a more idealized individual according to your own conception of what that is, there's a joy associated with that. There's a sense of fulfillment, and it stays with you. It becomes a part of you, so that when you walk around, you radiate that sense of joy. You are a different person than you were before because of the permanent change. That too is the Tao. And when you are living right, so you don't just look good, you feel good, and you have healthy longevity, you are also being lasting. You are also being in accordance with the Tao. Now, the human lifespan is going to come to an end sooner or later. But what the sages say in Tao traditions is that you need to live out the natural lifespan that is healthy, active, fulfilling, meaningful. That's what it means to live right. That's what it means to have healthy longevity. I think it's a worthwhile goal. I think we owe it to ourselves to be as healthy as possible, so we can enjoy life, enjoy one another, enjoy this trip that we're currently on right now, where it is a blessing for all of us to be walking together. Am I right? Your positive influence on others is also real and lasting. So think about what happens when you have actually figured this stuff all out for yourself, and you can prove it. It's become evident to everybody around you that you have something that is special, something that doesn't come and go. You then begin to influence other people in a positive way. Even the people who don't really have any idea what you're talking about when it comes to the Tao, like they look at you funny. What, Tao? Oh yeah, that Eastern, that quaint, exotic stuff. Well, are you getting into that now? Is this a phase you are going through? Well, when they see the actual results, when they see how happy and joyous you are, like all the time, then they're going to start to think there's something there. I think he's onto something. Maybe I should find out what that is. So you see, very naturally, without the Tao cultivator doing anything, you begin to exert a good influence on everybody around you. That too is real. That too is the Tao. And think about this. The positive influence that you exert on other people may be the younger generation. If you raise them up right, if you influence them the right way, they carry on living the principles and ideals that you have taught to them. So when you are ready to depart this world, they continue on carrying your legacy. In that way, your influence, your positive influence on other people will go beyond the lifespan that you spend on this planet. So that too is the Tao. So when we talk about 长久, long-lasting, something that is of indefinite duration, that is in accordance with the Tao, it's actually complex. It's actually many, many different layers of meaning, as you can see in this slide. Let's continue on to line 10. This is called deep roots and firm foundation. So I'll break it down. First of all, we have the first two characters that translate directly to is called, and this is implied, so it shows up in the translation. This is called deep roots, 深根. So I do know that when you're looking at the pinyin, you're gonna think that it's 先间. Well, it's actually 根. The second sound is not 间, like generation. More, it's closer to gun. Gun. No exact equivalent in English pronunciation. So literally, the two characters mean, the first character means deep, and the second character means roots. So the example that I provided before, the plant that cracks through concrete, it's got deep roots. And here's another picture of deep roots just to kind of illustrate the meaning. Deep roots is something that we want to get into with some detail and depth. These characters are still used in modern times with the exact same meaning. So the well-established Tao is symbolized by this image that you see here. The well-established Tao is like a tree that stands tall, that is strong, and its strength comes from the roots that burrows deep into the earth, which is a firm foundation for the tree. So then let's talk about the firm foundation for just a moment. The two characters that you see there, this is quite literal. They're translated separately as solid and foundation. So translation is firm foundation, which is very close. So let me talk about what that is. First of all, when we put the last four characters together, this is called deep roots and firm foundation. We're referring to a plant with deep roots, like this tree that you see in the image. And when we talk about firm foundation, you can think of a great palace with a strong foundation. So metaphorically, just as a healthy plant has roots deep in the earth, and a great palace has a strong foundation underneath, an authentic Tao cultivator is strong with the basics. What are the basics? The basics are daily cultivation and fundamental principles. So that's a major goal in cultivation, is to become thoroughly familiar with the practices, daily cultivation, fundamental principles, to know them by heart. Yet another context of being well prepared is being well prepared. Having deep roots means you are well prepared. This is in the context of like a tree that has burrowed deeply into the earth is well prepared for an incoming storm. In a similar way, a Tao cultivator who has done his or her homework is like establishing deep roots to be always well prepared. And this applies to many different aspects in life. So let me show the text here, and then we can talk about a couple of quick examples. A Tao cultivator who is strong in the basics and fundamental principles. Now, this doesn't need to apply just to Tao cultivation. Think about this. Imagine that there's a candidate who's up for a job interview, and this candidate is competing with hundreds of other people for just a small handful of positions. But this candidate, if understanding the Tao and this particular principle that we're talking about here, establishing deep roots in terms of being very well prepared, that if he or she were to do research on the company, to understand the company's mission, their objectives, the business goals before going in for the interview, well, the chances of this person winning the position skyrockets in accordance with the Tao. It's the same thing for someone who's working in sales. Before approaching the company in a sales call or a sales presentation, being well prepared, establishing roots, allows this person to speak at a level well above their peers in the sales profession. These are just a couple of quick, simple examples on why the Boy Scouts motto, their creed, is to be always prepared, prepare for anything. And in the world in which we live, it pays off extremely well to have that advanced preparation. Having the advanced preparation means that you are not panicky and stressed out when it comes time to deliver. Indeed, your delivery can be very polished. You are not nervous because you are prepared. So we are now getting to the end of this chapter. So let's take a look at these two characters. The last line says, the Tao of longevity and lasting vision. So what are the characters? Well, the first two characters, Changsheng, literally the first character is long and the second character is life. And if you recall, the Chinese name for the chapter, chapter 59, is this right here, long life, longevity. So we need to mention at this point that these two characters historically in Chinese history have been misinterpreted as physical immortality. And the misinterpretation has led people on a wild goose chase looking for methods to enable physical immortality. What it actually means, though, is not that. It means a long and meaningful life living in the Tao. And because it's a long and meaningful life living in the Tao, naturally, as a result, you have that positive influence we were just talking about on other people that will last long beyond one's life. So Lao Tzu applies the same idea to countries, kingdoms, empires, and individuals. So the life of a person, just like the life of a kingdom or country, it can be very dependent on how well the roots are established, how well built the foundation is underneath. The more you can do in terms of the foundation and the roots, the more you can be like the Tao, which lasts indefinitely because the Tao is infinite. So for the individual, the physical body may be transient. Our physical lifetime is finite, it's limited, but the spiritual side of it is a completely different matter. The spiritual side goes on forever. It is of the Tao. It returns to the Tao. It will come again from the Tao. Therefore, the whole thing makes a beautiful kind of sense together, that if we're able to walk this path, if we're able to live in accordance with the Tao, then literally there is a kind of immortality in the spiritual sense. That immortality specifically is expressed as lasting vision, 久视. These two characters literally, the first character means long in terms of a long time, long duration, and then the second character means vision. Long vision, lasting vision, a vision of a long extended duration. And indeed, notice that these are the two characters in the middle of line 11. They follow the first two characters, which is long life. Well, long life and lasting vision, when you put them together, it's a clue that the long life is not about physical immortality, because the lasting vision is something that extends beyond one's lifetime. So let's explore the meaning for Tao cultivators very specifically. Lasting vision, what does it mean? Well, first of all, it is the wisdom to look into the future, to think long term, not just the short term, the present, but what's going to happen many, many years from now. Number two, the wisdom to create lasting example for others to see and hopefully to emulate. If you can create something that is genuinely, authentically, truly good, it's going to be worthy for other people to emulate. Are you able to set such an example? Would your children, grandchildren, descendants be able to benefit from a positive, good example that you set? Something to think about. Number three, the wisdom to perceive the eternal Tao. Okay, so lasting vision has more than just one meaning. It's to be able to look long-term into the future. It's to be able to have that wisdom to set an example that will be lasting, that will be a positive legacy that you leave behind. And lastly, it's going to be the wisdom in you, like now, like right now, to be able to understand and perceive the eternal nature of the Tao. And that's something that we can work on right away, all of us. So now let's put the whole thing together, the whole line together, the Tao of longevity and lasting vision. It basically is a beautiful summary for the reason to cultivate the Tao. Why do I say that? Because ultimately, the Tao is about living well, not living indefinitely. Nobody ever promised that. But what Lao Tzu does say is that if you are living like this, it's going to be the best possible life that one can live. So overall, this means, number one, cultivate health so you make the most of your life. You stick around. And you stick around not just for yourself, but also for all your loved ones, everybody around you. You know, there's a famous actor who was being interviewed, and the question from the host was, hey, I gotta ask you a question. What do you think happens when we die? Okay, what do you think happens when we die? On the face of it, you can imagine the question is aimed at, like, what is your belief on the afterlife? You think we go to heaven? You think we get reincarnated? Well, you know, what is it? What do you believe? This particular actor is wise beyond his years. So he thinks about it. He takes a moment. He takes time, doesn't rush into an answer. Then he says, I think what happens when we die is that we will be missed by the people who love us. So think about that for a moment. It's about what impression what memories, what values you leave behind when the time comes. That is part of the meaning and the purpose of life. Now, what about before you get to that point? Well, before you get to that point, you want to be healthy. You want to make the most of your time here so you can do as much good as you possibly can. And perhaps even more importantly, you want to have a good time. You should have a good time. Every day should be special and full of joy. And lastly, you want to create meaning for yourself and everyone around you. That is what it means. That is the reason for Tao cultivation. Now you see the progression, your progression to the Tao. Just to remind everybody, before we go to the summary, remember it begins with conservation. Conserve your energy and time and your attention span. It leads to submitting early. Listen, quit looking around. Get on the path of the Tao as soon as you possibly can. If you are not on it already, the best thing you can do for yourself is to get on it now. Number 3 from Lao Tzu. It means when you start walking the path, you're going to be accumulating virtues. And you begin to see how powerful that is when you can overcome anything. Then you realized that this means all the limitations you thought you had before, a lot of them just don't apply. You become unlimited. You possess spiritual sovereignty. You realize you can grasp the power, take the reins of power to determine your own spiritual destiny. How cool is that? Then you become everlasting. Remember, all of those different aspects of duration, lasting, influence beyond your years, all of those are included in being everlasting, being Tao-like, being congruent with the Tao was the way that I expressed. And this means putting down deep roots, firm foundation, establishing the Tao practice in your life, and helping others establish theirs. This eventually leads to the Tao of longevity and lasting vision. So this is the whole thing. This is the progression. This is the journey that you and I are on right now. And maybe today is the first day of that journey for many of us. If so, that's awesome. Let's keep walking together for some time to come. Now, we're running out of time today, so we're not going to have time to do the paraphrase or the full circle. What we can do, though, is that we can jump to the summary to kind of summarize everything that we have talked about last time and everything we have talked about today. I'm happy to say, I'm happy to see that it's a complete picture. It's the complete graphical representation of the path, the progression to the Tao that Lao Tzu intended to express. So the first part of it that we looked at last time begins with conserve, and it's the realization that what we have in this material world, everything that we have, time, resources, all limited, all finite. Gotta make the best of what we have. Submit early. The sooner you start walking the path, the better. And congratulations that you are actually, that you made it through the entire meeting to the summary. It means that you are now on the path. Let's just keep walking together. Number 3, accumulate virtues. It's the power of small, gradual changes over time. It doesn't seem like a whole lot on a day-to-day basis. Over time, it's incredible. Number 4, overcome all obstacles. Nothing can stand in your way. So this is all stuff that we talked about in the previous meeting. Let's talk about all the things we covered today. When you can overcome anything, then your limits are not what you thought they were. You transcend the limitations you had before. Number 6, spiritual sovereignty, independence and authority at the deepest level. If you prefer, the level of the soul. Number 7, be everlasting, to be steady and constant in a world of chaos. Let's face it, everybody, our world is a world of chaos. Look at everything that is happening right now. In this world, what it really needs is your steady and constant presence. You can be the beacon of the Tao that is steady, that is always there, that is the rock in turbulent seas. So be everlasting. Number 8, establish deep roots, building that strong foundation for oneness with the Tao, burrowing deep into the earth to grasp firmly onto what is real. And what is real is the Tao. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.